My name is Taylor Simmers. I'm 29 years old, and I never thought a simple dinner would shatter everything I believed about family, respect, and myself. They mocked me, right to my face, called me brave for being broke, laughed when I said I was doing fine. But that night, something happened. A whisper from a waiter changed the room, and the truth they'd spent years ignoring finally hit them like a freight train. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about reclaiming your worth, quietly, powerfully. So if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you, you'll feel this one. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if stories like these speak to your soul. Let's begin. It happened at a restaurant I never would have chosen. White linen tablecloths, ambient lighting, and a wine list thicker than my resume. But I didn't plan this dinner. My family did. The same family that made sure I knew I didn't quite measure up. And as I sat across from them, still wearing the work shirt I'd rushed over in, I could feel it in the air. Tonight wasn't about reconnecting, it was about ranking. There was a moment, brief, almost invisible, when the waiter leaned toward me to pour water and whispered something no one else heard. But I'll get to that. First, let me take you to the second the knives came out. Not the silver ones on the table. No, those were just props. I'm talking about the ones in their words, polished, sharp, and delivered with a smile. My cousin Mia, dressed in something that probably cost more than my rent, laughed and said, "So, Taylor, still doing that freelance thing? Or did you finally get a real job?" There it was. First strike. I managed a small smile, the kind that protects your throat while you're bleeding inside. "Still doing my thing," I replied, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. But she wasn't done. "That's so brave. I mean, I'd be terrified without a 401k. And just like that, the whole table erupted in laughter. Not at a joke, at me. It was then I realized. This dinner wasn't just a gathering. It was a performance. And I was the cautionary tale. My uncle cleared his throat. He always did that before giving one of his life advice speeches. "You know, Taylor," he said, swirling his wine like it held wisdom, "there's no shame in admitting it's time to grow up. Find something stable. Start thinking long-term." As if I hadn't. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that the same morning I signed a lease on a commercial space for the dream I'd built from scratch. That my bank account looked different now than it ever had before. That I had finally crossed the line between survival and security. But they didn't ask. They assumed. And maybe, deep down, I let them. Because I had grown up playing their game, where job titles were currency and zip codes defined your worth. And I had walked away from that life, quietly, to build one that looked nothing like theirs. But here, under the chandelier glow and judgmental eyes, I felt like that 13-year-old again. The one who wore off-brand sneakers to the family picnic. The one who got a pat on the back instead of a real gift. The pain wasn't just in what they said, it was in how they said it. The fake concern, the tight smiles, the condescension hidden behind every compliment. They didn't hate me. They pitied me. And that was worse. And then came the moment that changed everything. We were halfway through dessert when the waiter returned. A tall man in his 40s with the kind of presence you don't expect in someone who carries plates. He leaned in toward me, just enough that only I could hear. "Mr. Simmers," he said softly. "Your driver just confirmed. He's waiting outside. Shall I let him know you'll be another 10 minutes? The entire table froze. I didn't respond immediately, because I wasn't sure what had just happened. But the silence was deafening. And in that space, before I answered, their faces twisted in real confusion. Not curiosity, confusion, as if the image they had of me couldn't possibly fit with what they'd just heard. But before I tell you what happened next, before I explain why that waiter said what he said, let me take you back to where this all began, to the months before this dinner, to the sacrifices no one saw, to the night I almost gave up. Because before there was a driver, before there was a business, before there was a whisper of validation, there was only me. And I wasn't always this calm. Before the dinner, before the mockery and the whisper from the waiter, my life looked nothing like what they imagined. I wasn't lounging around in pajamas all day with a laptop and a latte, manifesting success. I was building something, quietly, relentlessly, brick by invisible brick. Most days started at 6 a.m. in the same worn-down studio apartment I'd called home for 5 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every morning, I'd walk past the vision board on my wall, a torn-out picture of a downtown storefront, a screenshot of a Shopify dashboard I wasn't yet earning, and a sticky note with just 2 words, "Stay ruthless." That's what I told myself every time doubt crept in, which was often. I ran a branding consultancy. Not the kind with a polished office and a receptionist. Mine was built from referrals, late-night DMs, and coffee shop meetings. I designed logos, pitched messaging strategies, and crafted visual identities for small businesses, mostly solopreneurs trying to look legit on a tight budget. I knew their hustle because I lived it too. Clients came and went. Some paid late, some never paid at all. There were nights I'd fall asleep with my laptop on my stomach, too tired to care about the blue light. But it was working. Slowly. In the past 6 months, things started shifting. One campaign went viral. Then a local coffee chain hired me to rebrand their entire visual identity. And suddenly, I wasn't just another freelancer. I had leverage. But the thing about success when no one's watching is, it doesn't feel like success. It just feels like pressure. And silence. No one claps when you meet your internal milestones. There's no audience when you quietly turn down a lowball client because you finally know your worth. Still, I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I remembered how they'd treated me the last time I tried. 2 years ago, I'd flown home for Thanksgiving, full of energy and updates. I told them about a new client who'd prepaid me $3,000. My uncle blinked and said, "So, that's before taxes, right?" And Mia. She asked if I had backup plans, just in case the internet broke. So I stopped talking. I let them think what they wanted, because explaining a non-traditional path to people addicted to traditional metrics is like speaking another language. But there was one person I always kept in the loop: Ben, my roommate, best friend, and business whisperer. We met 4 years ago at a networking mixer neither of us wanted to attend. He was the only one not pitching anything, just listening, drinking a Coke, wearing a Nirvana shirt under a blazer. He got me. He was the one who helped me sketch the first draft of my brand strategy on the back of a pizza box. We shared wins. We covered each other's rent when needed. He once said, "Taylor, you're the kind of person people underestimate until they can't afford to anymore." I never forgot that. My world revolved around this quiet rhythm: client calls in the morning, long walks to clear my head in the afternoon, strategy sprints in the evening, and deep talks with Ben after midnight. We dreamed together about co-owning a creative studio, about hiring a team, about doing it our way, without permission. Those nights felt sacred. But not everything was warm. There were shadows, too. Red flags started showing up in the form of comments, offhand remarks from Mia when I posted a client win on Instagram. "Love how everyone's a CEO now." Or my dad's silence when I emailed him my latest brand campaign, hoping for just one, "Proud of you." He never replied. Then there was the group chat. Our family had one, titled Simmer's Legacy, like some unspoken dynasty was being protected. Every week it was updates about promotions, new cars, baby showers. When I posted about launching a client's 6-figure Kickstarter, the message got one heart emoji. From Ben. No one else responded. The assumption was always the same. Taylor's trying. Not thriving, just trying. They thought they knew my story. that I was the sibling who chose struggle, that I was idealistic, maybe even naive, but never powerful, never stable. Never someone who would someday outrun the very image they'd boxed me into. That's the assumption that would shatter later. But for now, I carried it like a weight I'd grown used to. Like a jacket you forget you're wearing until someone takes it off and you finally breathe. I didn't hate them. I just didn't trust them with my truth. And then came the invitation. It arrived in a group text. Dinner this Friday at Cardinale's. 7 p.m. sharp. Be there! Cardinale's was the kind of restaurant people posted about. Not for the food, for the proof. Proof you'd made it. At first, I ignored the message. Ben noticed. You're not going? I shrugged. What for? So they can roast me over risotto? He raised an eyebrow. Maybe it's time they see who you've become, not who they remember. That hit something in me, so I said yes. Not to prove anything, but to be seen. Really seen. I got a haircut. Polished my shoes. Printed the lease agreement to the new office space and folded it into my wallet. Not to show anyone, but to remind myself. This wasn't the end of the road. It was just the beginning. But what I didn't know was this. Someone else was watching me closely. Someone who had spent years playing supportive, but didn't like losing control. And that someone, they were sitting at that table too, smiling, waiting, sharpening their words. The moment the waiter whispered about a driver, time cracked. Just for a second. It was like the whole table blinked in unison, then sat still, frozen in a new version of reality they couldn't quite compute. Mia tilted her head, smirking. A driver, Tay? Don't tell me you're dating Rich now. There was a light chuckle from Uncle Ron. I could feel every eye pressing against me, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. I turned to the waiter. Tell him I'll be out shortly. The waiter nodded, then did something no one noticed but me. He smiled. Not a smile of service, a knowing smile. And that was when I knew. Ben had sent him. The luxury sedan outside. Ben's doing. He had told me earlier that week, if you're going to walk into the lion's den, at least arrive like a lion. I hadn't argued. I just didn't expect him to go that far. But the real twist wasn't the driver. It was what came after. Mia leaned in again. Seriously, though, Taylor, you always were creative. Just curious. What do you actually make? Before I could answer, my aunt interrupted. You know, Mia's firm just got bought out. She's working with international clients now. It's a big step up. The undertone was clear. That's success. That's what we praise here. I was about to let it go. Let the conversation slide into another round of veiled insults. When my phone buzzed. Ben again. Just one line. Check the news. I opened the link. Front page of Indie Creators Weekly. There it was. A full write-up about my latest campaign. A viral rebrand for a nonprofit that had just landed a national grant. The headline read, The Face Behind the Frequency. Taylor Simmers is redefining community brands. I could have said nothing. I should have said nothing. But something inside me cracked open. It wasn't pride. It was exhaustion. So I opened the article on my phone, placed it face up on the table, and pushed it toward Mia. No need to be curious. This is what I make. Her eyes flicked down. She went pale. For the first time all evening, she had no words. That's when my dad spoke up, low and slow. Why didn't you tell us? And I wanted to scream. Because I had, years ago, dozens of times, in text messages, in emails, in person, before I stopped trying. But the truth was, they never heard me. Because they never believed in me. And that was the real betrayal. Not what they said that night, but what they hadn't said for years. Not once had they called just to ask how I was doing. Not once had they shared my wins. They assumed the worst and let that assumption grow into indifference. My cousin laughed nervously. Wow, Tay, good for you. I mean, who would have thought? And that sentence right there, that was the final cut. Who would have thought? As if I hadn't been building this with bleeding fingers. As if I hadn't drowned in doubt more times than I can count. As if this version of me was an accident. I stood up. My body moved before my brain caught up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just placed a few bills on the table and said, I didn't come here to be believed. I came here to eat. And I walked out. But don't let the clean exit fool you. That night destroyed me. By the time I slid into the back of the black car, my hands were shaking. The leather felt too soft, too clean, too... not mine. I told the driver to keep driving. No destination. Just move. And somewhere between Meridian and Fall Creek Parkway, I unraveled. Tears came in bursts. Not gentle movie tears. The kind that blind you. The kind that choke. I stared at my reflection in the window, distorted by city lights, and whispered, why wasn't I enough for them until now? And that voice, that awful voice, answered back inside me. Maybe you're still not. That night, I didn't go home. I had the driver drop me off 2 blocks from Ben's place, but I didn't knock. I sat on the curb, hoodie pulled over my head, watching cars pass, feeling like a ghost in my own success story. All my wins suddenly felt hollow. What's the point of building anything if the people who raised you refuse to see it? That week, I spiraled. Emails went unanswered. Calls from clients sat ignored. Ben tried. God, he tried. But I shut him out. Told him I was resting. But I wasn't resting. I was collapsing. There was a moment I'll never forget. I opened my laptop one night to finish a project and stared at the blinking cursor for 45 minutes. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. Just sat there. Paralyzed. Because if the people who mattered most thought I was still a joke, then maybe I was. Grief and rage, shame and clarity. They fought inside me like warring wolves. Part of me wanted to burn it all down, shut the business, disappear. Another part whispered, they don't get to define you. But that whisper was weak. I was tired. Not just physically. Soul tired. I stopped posting online, stopped checking stats, stopped showing up for the life I'd fought for. Because that dinner stripped me of something I didn't even realize I still needed. Their approval. And that's the cruel twist, isn't it? You can build everything, the brand, the income, the independence, and still crave a nod from the people who doubted you most. It's not rational. It's human. And in that humanity, I broke. Until one night, 4 days after the dinner, Ben walked into my apartment uninvited. He found me sitting on the floor, eating dry cereal straight from the box. He didn't ask questions, he just sat. Then said, build for those who clap with their whole soul. Ignore the ones who wait for proof. I didn't respond, just nodded. But a part of me began to stir. Because maybe the collapse was necessary. Maybe some parts of me had to die. So something truer could live. I thought the worst was over when I walked out of that restaurant. Thought I had the final word, the mic drop. But grief doesn't care about drama. It moves in slow waves, quiet, unseen, until it drowns you. And that's what the weeks after the dinner became, a long, suffocating submersion. I ghosted nearly everyone, clients, friends, even Ben. I didn't answer his texts, didn't open the door when he knocked. I told myself I needed space. But the truth? I didn't want to be witnessed in this version of myself. Bitter, unraveling, unsure. Every day felt the same. Wake up late, scroll endlessly, microwave something that tasted like cardboard, then fall asleep to the sound of my own thoughts scratching at the walls. My business didn't crumble overnight, but the foundation started cracking. Missed deadlines, uninspired work. One client dropped me, then another. And with each loss, I convinced myself they'd all been right. Maybe I was a fluke. Maybe my little success was a cosmic accident. I tried to distract myself. A dating app here, a bar night there. Once I got drunk at an open mic and tried to freestyle about branding. People laughed. Not with me. It should have been funny. But I went home and cried so hard my chest felt bruised. I tried therapy. Sat across from a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She asked, "When's the last time you felt proud of yourself?" And I couldn't answer. Not because I hadn't been, but because I didn't feel it. Not anymore. She said I had internalized invalidation, that I was carrying voices that didn't belong to me. It sounded poetic in the room, but outside, it felt like nonsense. How do you silence voices that sound like your father's laugh or your cousin's smirk? One night, I walked into the new office I had signed the lease for. It still smelled like paint and possibility, but it felt hollow. I sat on the floor, back against the glass, knees pulled to my chest, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry. I didn't even know who I was apologizing to. Myself, maybe." The false hope came 2 days later. An old client emailed me, said they were launching a new project and wanted me to lead the entire creative direction. 5-figure retainer, tight deadline, high visibility. I almost didn't respond, but something in me woke up. I dusted off my tools, mapped out a plan, and threw myself into the work like it was my lifeline. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt like me again, alive, sharp, hungry. I pitched the first round of concepts on Zoom, camera on, voice clear. The client smiled, clapped even, said they were thrilled. I logged off and cried in gratitude. That was on a Thursday. By Monday, it all imploded. I woke up to a group email from their new investor. They'd decided to go in a different direction and bring the work in-house. No warning, no payout. Just like that. Cut. The worst part? They used one of my exact taglines in the rebrand that launched the next week. I confronted them. They said I hadn't signed the right clause, that they owned the pitch deck, that it was just business. But it wasn't. It was a violation. It was theft wrapped in legal vocabulary, and I broke again. That night, I smashed a glass in my kitchen just to feel something, then immediately panicked and swept it up like a criminal at a crime scene. What was happening to me? I didn't recognize the person in the mirror. Sunken eyes, a mouth that rarely smiled, an inbox full of overdue notices, and a dream that now felt more like a burden. The next day, I did something I never thought I would. I texted Ben. Just 2 words. "Help me." He was at my door 20 minutes later, holding breakfast and an old hoodie of mine. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't judge. He just sat on the couch, turned on some lo-fi and said, "Let's build from here." And that's when I started to rebuild. Not fast, not clean, but real. Ben became my mirror. Every time I forgot who I was, he reminded me. Not with pep talks, but with presence. He showed up. And one night, after a long silent drive, he pulled over by the canal and said, "You don't need their approval, but you do need to forgive them, or this pain will own you." I stared at the water. Didn't answer. But something clicked. I wasn't healing because I was still carrying their permission like it was oxygen. I had to let it go. All of it. So I made a list. Not of goals, but of goodbyes. I wrote down everything I was ready to release. Needing my father to be proud. Hoping Mia would respect me. Explaining my path to people committed to misunderstanding it. Shrinking my joy so others wouldn't feel small. And at the very bottom, I wrote, "The dream I had of being accepted by the people who raised me." I folded the list, burned it in the sink, watched the smoke rise like a prayer. That was the sacrifice. Not the business, not the income, but the illusion that they would ever be my validation. I moved out of that apartment a month later. Didn't buy anything fancy, just a small place with sunlight and silence, and a whiteboard on the wall that read, "Build for the ones who believe before they understand." It didn't happen overnight. No thunderbolt of motivation, no movie montage fix, just slow, unglamorous choices that added up to something sacred. Peace. I started with mornings. Instead of snoozing through despair, I got up early again, made real coffee, lit a candle, journaled, not for productivity but for clarity. Every entry began the same. Today, I will not betray myself. That alone changed everything. Ben and I started working together officially. He had always been my quiet strategist, but now we made it real, co-founders. We called it Kind Frequency, a creative studio for brands with soul. We didn't chase big clients. We chased aligned ones. I turned down the first corporate offer that came in, 6 figures, global reach, but something about their energy was off. Transactional, cold. Old Taylor might have said yes out of fear, but knew me understood. Not all money is worth the cost. We signed 5 dream clients in 6 weeks. A wellness brand started by single moms, a nonprofit teaching tech to inner-city teens, a family-owned bakery whose daughter had designed their logo in crayons. Every contract felt like medicine. The office that once made me feel like an imposter now pulsed with creative energy. Plants thrived in the window. Ben brought in vinyl records. Clients stayed after meetings just to talk about life. It was slow, steady, and alive, like healing. Physically, I changed too, not drastically, but enough. My eyes looked clearer. My laugh came easier. I started wearing clothes that made me feel like a vision, not a placeholder. Therapy helped. So did letting go of trying to fix anyone else's perception of me. I unfollowed family members who posted backhanded things. I silenced the group chat. And when my dad called once, just to check in, I kept it short and kind. I didn't need to perform anymore. I made space. For breath, for laughter, for people who saw me without squinting. One of those people was Aria. We met at a small branding conference downtown. She was speaking on storytelling for mission-based companies. Her presence was electric, grounded, smart, effortless. Afterward, I introduced myself. She smiled and said, "I know who you are. Your work with Ripple Books was brilliant." And just like that, something inside me softened. We started slow. Coffee, then walks, then deeper talks. She didn't ask what I earned or who I'd worked with. She asked what scared me, what healed me, what I wanted to build in 10 years that had nothing to do with success. It wasn't fireworks, it was warmth, a steady fire that didn't demand to be fed to stay alive. For the first time, I let someone love the version of me that wasn't trying to prove anything. And in doing so, I began loving him too. I became more selective with my time, said no without explaining, protected my mornings, treated rest as sacred. Even in growth, I moved from wholeness, not hunger. And slowly, a life emerged that looked nothing like what I thought I needed, but felt more like home than anything before. But peace doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you to hold it differently. One afternoon, Ben and I got an email, a new inquiry. The subject line read, "Potential brand alignment, Simmer's family estate." At first, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. Turns out, my Uncle Ron had invested in a new legacy wine label with Mia and her fiancé. They wanted to launch a sleek rebrand for national distribution, and somehow, someone on their team had recommended us. I laughed, hard. Ben raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just the timing." I didn't respond right away. I let the email sit there, unread, a relic from the world I'd buried. But something stirred. Not anger, not ego, curiosity. Because even after everything, even after they cut me with smiles and smirks, they had come full circle, not knowing who they were writing to, not realizing the table had turned. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was reverence. For how far I'd come. For the silence I'd honored. For the life I'd created without needing their applause. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I knew. Something was coming. A collision. A chance to stand in the same room again, as the version of me they never expected. This time, I wouldn't walk out broken. This time, I'd walk in whole. They say some doors, once closed, stay closed for good. But sometimes, they creak back open. Not for reconciliation, but for revelation. The day of the meeting, it was raining. Not hard. Just that steady, soft kind that feels like punctuation. I parked outside the tasting room, one of those over-designed vineyard spaces that tried too hard to be rustic. Slate walls, exposed beams, as if wealth needed weathering to feel authentic. Ben was already inside, seated at the far end of the room, laptop open, calm as a monk. He gave me a small nod as I walked in. I wore black, not dramatic, just clean, sharp, like truth. Across the long oak table sat Mia, Uncle Ron, and her fiancé, Travis. They were mid-laugh when they saw me. And then, silence. Mia blinked. Taylor? I nodded, placed my notebook down. Afternoon. Uncle Ron squinted, confused. Wait, you're the one from Kind Frequency? Ben looked up. Yes, Taylor co-founded it. Their eyes shifted. Mia glanced at her tablet, scrolling. Something clicked behind her gaze, like a file she'd skimmed but never actually read. Travis cleared his throat. We, didn't realize. You were behind that brand. Most people don't, I said, not unkindly, just honestly. They launched into their pitch. A new wine label inspired by the Simmers legacy, a line they wanted to position as elegant, aspirational, generational. They spoke of brand alignment, generational storytelling, positioning across social verticals. Buzzwords floated across the table like smoke. I listened, not to their words, but to their discomfort. They couldn't look me in the eye for more than a few seconds. They kept glancing at each other, as if seeking permission to exist in this room with me. When they finished, Mia leaned back, arms crossed. So, what do you think? I looked at Ben. He nodded slightly. This was my moment. I leaned forward, hands folded, calm, still, like a storm waiting to be asked a question. I think, I said slowly, what you're building could be beautiful, if you believed in it the way you pretended not to believe in me. The silence was immediate, not defensive, not explosive, just raw. Mia blinked. Hard. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Uncle Ron adjusted his collar, cleared his throat. Taylor, I think you might be... I'm not upset, I said, cutting him off softly. This isn't about resentment. This is about resonance. Mia sat straighter. You don't have to do this. I know. Another pause. And then I stood, reached into my bag, pulled out the original pitch deck, the one Ben and I had crafted late into the night, even after knowing who the client was. Because sometimes, you serve the art, regardless of the audience. I slid it across the table, not with drama, with grace. You can have it, I said. No charge, no contract. Consider it a gift from the version of me you never made space for. Mia looked stunned. Her fingers grazed the cover. She didn't open it. You're really not going to take the project? She asked quietly. I smiled. For me, this was the project. And there it was, the line. Her face changed, the way mirrors do when the light shifts. I saw it hit her, not the guilt, the regret, the reflection of what she could have been. Had she chosen creation over competition? Curiosity over control, support over silence. For the first time, she looked small, not because I made her feel that way, but because power, when not owned, leaves shadows behind. Ben stood beside me. We packed our things slowly, deliberately. There was no rush, only peace. As I turned to leave, Uncle Ron called out, "Taylor?" I paused, didn't turn. "We were wrong," he said. "I see that now." I nodded once, kept walking. Because closure isn't always conversation. Sometimes it's presence. Sometimes it's a quiet exit that doesn't ask for applause. And as the rain tapped gently against the glass doors, I stepped outside. Not vindicated, but free. There's a kind of silence that doesn't ache. Not the silence of being ignored, dismissed, unseen, but the kind that wraps around you like morning light through sheer curtains. That's what life sounds like now. Not louder, just clearer. It's been 6 months since the Vineyard meeting. I never heard from them again. No emails, no follow-ups, no apologies. And somehow, I'm okay with that. Ben and I moved Kind Frequency into a new space. A converted brick loft with tall windows and creaky floors that sing when you walk. We have plants we remember to water, clients we love. Work that feels like purpose, not penance. The old version of me would have posted it all. Would have documented the glow-up, turned pain into content. But now, I keep more for myself. Not because I'm hiding, because I'm full. Arya and I sit on the fire escape some nights, wrapped in a blanket, legs tangled, sipping tea like elders in young bodies. We talk about everything. And nothing. There's no need to impress. She sees me, and I let her. One night, she asked me, "Do you think you'll ever reach out to them again?" I thought about it, really sat with it, then said, "I think I already did. Just not with words. Because sometimes, you write your forgiveness in the way you no longer flinch, in the laughter that comes easier, in the boundaries you no longer feel guilty for needing." I still keep a drawer of unsent letters. One for Mia, one for my father, one for the version of me who waited by the phone, hoping someone would ask how the pitch went. They're not angry, just honest. I open them sometimes when I need to remember how far I've come. Not to reopen the wound, but to honor the scar. There's one letter that matters most. It's the one I wrote to myself the night after that confrontation. I found it again last week, tucked inside an old notebook. It said, "Dear Taylor, you didn't need the room to clap. You needed to remember you built the room." I read that line 3 times, then exhaled, long and deep. Like I was finally done holding my breath. Some days are still messy. Deadlines pile. Clients ghost. Self-doubt knocks. But now I know the difference between discomfort and disrespect. Between building in silence and shrinking in fear. Between feedback and projection. I know who I am, and I know what I'm not. That's everything. I walk more now. Around the neighborhood. Through the local park where kids laugh without knowing why. I stop to look at trees. To feel the wind. To remind myself that life doesn't have to be earned in blood. Some mornings, I pass the old apartment. It's still there. Same peeling paint, same flickering porch light. But it feels distant. Like a chapter I read in another language. I nod at it. Not with regret, with reverence. Because that place held me when nothing else did. And now, I hold myself. I don't chase peace anymore. I embody it. I don't fight for a seat at tables where I'm not welcome. I build my own, longer, warmer, softer. And the people who sit with me now, they see me. Not the version they invented, me. That's how this ends. Not with revenge, not with applause, just with truth. A quiet, steady, sacred truth. That I am not who they thought I was. I am more, always was.